There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Canon Podcast, episode number 80. I am your host, Brian Miller, and I'm so glad you've decided to join me to talk about our favorite thing in the world, yet again, Star Wars. And tonight we've got a little bit to talk about, mainly mailbag questions. We're going to do a lot of mailbag this episode, but we're going to talk a little bit about some new canon, give some thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws so far. We're going to get back into the villain bracket, and then we'll do some mailbag. And to help navigate all of it, I am not alone tonight. Usef and I actually have a third person with us tonight. First off, Usef, thank you for joining from across the pond. I do appreciate it. I know it's super late where you're at. Thanks for joining. How are you tonight?
I'm very, very, very happy, not just to talk about Star Wars, but to talk about the future of Lucasfilm games and to talk about the future of Lucasfilm in general. And we have not one expert, but two. We have Brian Miller, who is amazing, and he is the man leading us through everything. We also have Richard F. and J.
We do. We actually do. Jay, from also across the pond from where I'm at. How are you tonight, brother? I know it's late where you're at, too. Thanks for joining. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, boys. Good to be here.
I'm ready to talk.
Days nicotine free.
Nicotine free? Oh my god!
12 days now that I've been off the cigs or the vapes.
I gave it up 7 years ago next week, and best thing I ever did. Best decision I ever made. So, you guys ready to talk some Star Wars? Let's get into it. First things first. Like I said, there's not a lot of news. So let's talk about some new canon real quick. This past week, we saw the release of the High Republic Beware the Nameless, the next High Republic young adult novel. I was hoping JG was going to be on tonight. He was going to join us, but he wasn't able to. He's a huge High Republic guy. I really wanted to get his thoughts on that book. But I'm excited for that one. I'm excited to get my hands on it. Chronicles of Corellia, Heir Apparent, Insider number 227. That is a short story in Star Wars Insider that released this week. Marvel's Ahsoka number 2 and the comic adaptation for the series released. And of course, we got the highly anticipated, somewhat kind of widely mixed thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws. We finally got the release of that, which I don't even know what I just did with my copy. I had it. Oh, I got it installing, don't I? I got it installing. Just picked it up today. But these two have already had a chance to play it and get some hours under the belt on the game. And I figured I would give you guys the opportunity tonight to kind of give some of your initial non-spoiler thoughts on the game. Don't give anything away really, really big, but kind of what are your feelings so far on the game? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And kind of what are you wanting from it? Jay, we'll start with you.
It's okay. It's your typical Ubisoft games. If you played Assassin's Creed or The Division, there's a lot of running around. There's a lot of fetch this, fetch that. Like just to sort of expand the lore and a lot of the background. I mean, that's kind of fun. I don't mind that. Some people I know will just get bored of that within the space of a few hours. The action side of it, it's okay. I mean, it is what you'd expect it to be. It's not necessarily open world like they make out. Sometimes you're driving along on your speeder and it'll say you return to your mission zone. So even if you're not actively doing that mission, it's just one that you've picked up and now you're sort of locked into it and you can't do anything until you've finished that mission. But story-wise, it's certainly interesting, and it has the scope. As long as they push out some real quality DLC, I don't mind paying for that. As long as I think it's value for money, and they've got the scope to push out years worth of what could be great quality DLC because of who you are. You know, I mean, I haven't finished the game, so I don't know if you turn out to be someone that's linked to somebody important. But at the moment, you're just a nobody. So you can just kind of weave your way in and out of the whole sort of saga without being involved in any big way. So you don't have to worry so much about conflicting storylines. So potentially you can have years worth of fun with it. In regards to the plot so far, I mean, the plot itself sounds basic. I mean, the synopsis is, which we've seen already. You know, you're a smuggler, you're a thief. You know, you break into a vault, you get caught, and you get this death mark put on you. And how do you escape? How do you escape all that? To get a team and rob the same guy again. But I think that's a little bit of a weak plot, but it is what it is. You know, it's work. You can work around it. But you know, there's some small customizable options. If you get the whole collection of the suits, each piece can give you a different sort of stat. And then you can always, if you have a specific look in mind, you can always change your suit to have a different sort of skin. So, for example, you might have all Imperial gear, which will make you almost invisible to just your general stormtrooper that's not paying attention. But you might want to maybe reskin that to look like it's the Rebel Commando outfit, but you'll still get the benefits of not being spotted by a stormtrooper. But you know, so that's kind of cool. But it is nice though to play the game from a different perspective. Where, I mean, I'm old school, old. I grew up, right, and some of you guys too, where you know your enemies in the games was either stormtroopers or it was the Hutt cartel. You'd be blasting bounty hunters, blasting weak way. It was always a weak way. I don't care where you were, what level you were on. A weak way got a bullet in the head. But this time, you're trying to pally up with them. Every time they don't like it, every time you do something and it annoys another faction, I spend my time trying to get good with all the cartels, with the Pikes, the Hutts, Crimson Dawn. Those are the three that's been announced in the trailers. We won't say any more than those three for now. But it is interesting seeing it from a different perspective. But I guess we'll see how it goes. How the story goes, we'll see when that whole thing comes to a close.
Fair enough. Usef, you've got some hours under your belt as well. What are your thoughts on it so far?
All right, so here's the thing. In my opinion, this is a great game. This is a really, really good game. I have loved Assassin's Creed games and Ubisoft games since the get-go. But to be fully honest, there's no real traditional skill tree when it comes to this game. Instead, you go around doing missions where, depending on your choices with the character, so you do these choices according to 3 different factions within these games. If you have read up within Star Wars, you know who these factions are. Your reputation will change across these 3 different factions who are really well known. And each faction has distinctly different perks to help you build a different play style. So it's not about your development tree or development progress. It's all about, if you actually decide to choose this faction, this faction, this faction, it'll help you decide which play style you want to do. And I actually really, really, really like that. Based on my preferred playstyle so far, I'm preferring a specific faction. For me, it's Crimson Dawn. I'll be honest right now. Anyway, to be completely honest, the cities are tight and crammed with Easter eggs. Really, a lot of Easter eggs. You can just go along and understand and hear these alien races. It's so interesting to hear them come along. You're in a Star Wars universe. The open planets are such a vast void, and it's full of life, giving you a room to explore. I'm happy to go out and explore and enjoy a Star Wars open world adventure game, and this is what I've been yearning for a while. Because really, this game gives me so much to do. The really best thing that I can say that it gives me is just the chance to go out in a Star Wars universe.
Fair enough. I'm excited to get on it tonight. As soon as we're done recording, I'm hopping on. I got mine pre-installing before we
I'm really surprised that you're not on it just yet, by the way.
I got to do this first. We got to talk about this stuff first before I can play.
I tell you what I really liked, right, with that game. Once you finish the whole tutorial, right, and you've done with the first sort of missions where because when you start off, you're sort of locked into your tutorial until all that's done. They do recommend you start off on a certain planet. I was like, okay, that's fine, but kindly shut up. I am going to Tatooine first, then I'll come back to do the game. And I tell you something which I really enjoyed, right? So I thought, we all right, yes, Tatooine's in almost everything, but then that's quintessence, that's the pathos to me. So I get that. I land down in some Cobb Vanth looking sort of outpost on the sticks, and I travel. I see a bunch of moisture farms. I go there, boom, bang, I find the last farm, and I travel to Mos Eisley. When I get off my speeder at Mos Eisley, without looking at the map, I used all of the landmarks, the ones that we recognize, from the film. And I found myself, I thought, right, let's see if I can find my own way to the cantina just by using the landmarks and the knowledge from the film. Because they rebuilt Mos Eisley exactly how it is. It's like Usef said, you walk down, there's people, they're touting death sticks on the street, they're selling meat on the sticks, there's everything. You're walking down these market stalls. And I found myself going into finding the cantina just by looking at the landmarks. But there is an ability tree. It may not be as in depth as some as the older Ubisoft games, but every time you meet a companion, they've got a series of skills that you can learn. And it's almost like they look like sabacc cards. So it's like, I don't know, to give you an easy example, and it is just an example. One of my favorite perks in there, I can't remember exactly what it's called. I refer to it as the Han Solo perk. And that's basically, if you get caught by an enemy, you can click your right stick if you're playing with a controller, and you will, whoa, hey, look, it's just me. I'm just you. You haven't got to worry about me. I'm just a good guy. And it buys you time while your character is just waffling, and then you can blast them. And if you do that so many times, say like you do it 5 times, then the next time you do it, instead of doing it with one person, you'll do it, and every available enemy in the room will come towards you like with blasters drawn, and then you could just boom, 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 just take them all straight out. So there is an ability tree, but there's also as well, like we were talking about Cal Kestis earlier. Obviously, with those games, it's like, right, okay, you can go to this particular spot, but you need to learn a certain force power to do it. So you've got to go back later in the game. That's still the same, except it's with technology. So I've learned how to slice data panels. Okay, now I can go back to this room and try slicing the computer. Loads of stuff like that. You can make it easier by changing the numbers and some of the alphabet to English instead of Arabic, but I had to keep it in Arabic. I can't read half the stuff that's in it, but I can read a couple of key letters, and then I can just piece everything together myself. But instead, you can't just switch it off and just switch it to whatever written dialogue is, you prefer. But it's like Usef said, it is massively in depth when it comes to the lore building and how it presents itself to you. It may not play well for some people. Some people might prefer a different play style. Fine, but you can't knock the team for the thought that they put in, because, as like Usef said, it was crammed. I mean, I found my way to the cantina that I categorically knew should be down this road. Take a left. I knew it had to be down here, past this big tower. And sure enough, it was right there. And even had the dewback sitting outside. That's the place. That's the cantina. That's where I'm going to go.
So you can even change like the written language in the game from English to Arabic. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if you pick up a data pad it'll automatically translate it for you. But like
Oh.
if you're playing, say, Sabak, it'll be on there first, and then it'll sort of filter out. But if you're playing Sabak, all the cards are written in Arabic. Now, some of the numbers are pretty standard to see, but some of the numbers are a little bit, well, if you don't know them, you don't know them. You can't just pick them over into whatever language you prefer. But so I just rather keep in Arabic and just learn that way.
I'll be dang. I didn't know all that. Wow. I'm excited to get into it tonight. I really am. I can't wait. We're going to end up doing an episode of the podcast probably where we just talk about Outlaws the whole time once we've all finished it.
I'll be honest. I wish I got someone who was more intricate within the story lore, But so far, so good. So far, so good. Does that make sense?
Well, as long as the character's believable and you can relate to that character in some sense, then
which she is. She is.
Yeah, as a character, what I was going to say when you were talking about, about being spunky. One of the things that I love about this game, right, and is the mini games that you can do in there. Now, you can walk up to a street vendor, and this street vendor's serving food. You sit down and you order food, but it's not necessarily for you. It's for you and Nix, your little creature that's with you. You watch this droid then prep all this food, and it turns into a mini game. You've got to press. I mean, I guess you could pass the mini game without pressing the buttons in the right order. I mean, ultimately, you're eating food. It's not like an animal's going to forget how to do it. But once you've eaten that food, you watch this little cute mini game with the two of them just bonding over the food. And it's each plate is different, and each reaction to the plate is different. But then what will happen is you then go to your loadout screen. You pick your clothing, you pick your medallions and your charms. And then when you go to customize Nix, your little creature, each of the food represents a new skill that he's learned. So they might have, say, a bowl of Zima soup. Zima soup. Zima soup, right? That Zima soup might make Nix a little bit testy. So if you send him out to go and distract a stormtrooper, say, hey, go over there now, right? And swing off his testicles. Off he'll go, right? And now he'll swing off two sets of testicles. He'll distract two people instead of one because you've equipped this Zima soup that's made him a little bit agitated. It's giving him the runs. He's got the two bob bits. He's out of it. And then another time you might equip him with this. He's not like he's walking around with a bag of ramen noodles on his side, but each meal becomes a different sort of skill for Nix. And it's just a nice little what's the term I'm looking for? When you watch them together, when you watch them eat together and just chat with each other, it's very homely, it's very natural. As natural as it can be based on the fact that it's a creature that's crawling over the table. But yeah, there is some lovely elements to the character. I'm not that far into the main story. I don't believe so, at least anyway. I try to do the side missions and all those side jobs. But yeah, she seems like somebody at the moment who is sort of thrust into things.
Mm-hmm.
She is, whereas Han Solo was naturally good and he knew it and was so arrogant with it, even when he messed up, it didn't matter because he still messed up with style. This girl, she's got the abilities, she's got the potential, but she doesn't sort of believe it right now. So she downplays herself a lot to other characters that she meets. Like at least in the beginning. Again, in terms of the main story, I'm not that far in. I just spent hours exploring and doing side quests. But yeah, it is literally just like we were talking last week, like the female Han Solo, except she doesn't have the Han Solo arrogance. She has a little bit more innocence to her, so it makes her more likable because she's a nice person.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that is Outlaws for you. Let's get into the villain bracket. Usef, this is your baby. This was your idea to begin with. We haven't done it in a hot minute. I know we're down to just a few people in this category that we're in right now. Give everybody a quick explanation, if you would, of what this villain bracket is.
So, Jane knows this. I love villains. Villains are, in my opinion, what makes a story the story. You can't have a great hero without having an even better villain. So, in my attempt to love Star Wars, which I do love, I really want to see just how cool Star Wars villains are. So, the whole entire point of this task is to see just how cool each Star Wars villain can be. Not how amazing, not how brilliant they can be, not how they can do in a fight, but just how cool they can be. So we started ranking them, Brian and I. And we've done a good job so far, I think, just about understanding in each category um, what each villain can do and what we can prefer them to be just as a Star Wars villain, just as a cool, you know what I mean? Like if you had to choose between one and two villains, not what you think could beat the other villain, but how cool you think they would be. Like if you wanted to be one, oh yeah.
Fair enough. And we are right now. We're on what is it? Miscellaneous military personnel right now, and we're down to the last
Exactly.
four. We're down to the last four, and so we're going to
Last
pit
four.
two of these people against each other, and then I guess that'll kind of tell us what our ranking is going to be next week. But we're going to put these up on our social media on Facebook. If you're listening on Spotify, you can scroll on down. You can see the poll there as well. We want you guys to vote on who you think is, not like Usef said, not who's going to win in a fight, but who is the cooler, more interesting villain. And we're going to go from there. So let's see who our pick is going to be this week. And we got the wheel up here so you guys know we're not just making this stuff up. We got Grand Admiral Thrawn as the first one. And I know who I want Thrawn to go up against. So let's see if we can get lucky enough to see if we can get the person I wanted to go up against. Thrawn versus Ray Sloan. It's Grand Admiral.
Oh, better than okay, good.
So personally, this is just me. I am going to go with Thrawn on this one. I think Thrawn is a lot cooler than Grand Admiral Sloan. Don't get me wrong; she's got her pros, but I feel like Thrawn's got a few more pros than she does. Jay, I know you're a big fan of the Aftermath trilogy. There's a lot of Ray Sloan in Aftermath. What do you think of these two getting put up against each other? Which one do you think is cooler?
I mean, the guy's got blue skin and red eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, he's got the Holy Grail in his menagerie while he's combat kicking dark troopers. Now, it's unfair to compare the two because, all right, there is going to be some prejudicial bias, just purely on the grounds that Thrawn's been around since 1991. And even though those stories aren't canon, elements from them of the character have been taken into canon. Of he acts, how he perceives himself and the world around him. You know, instead of getting angry with like one of the Rebels episodes, he grabs one of these his subordinates by the epaulets, and as he does, he realizes it's not your fault. You just don't get it. Yeah. And he just puts him back down, and he just
straightens his lapel,
straightens out the guy's lapels, and says, "Yeah, you know what? You don't have the mind to comprehend what I'm seeing," and walks off. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to talk about coolest villains, you got to chuck Bo-Katan in, because I don't see how everybody seems to genocidal, warmongering freak who was in Death Watch and obliterated planets, and now everyone loves her. No one's going after her. Like, what? No, the Republic should be nicking her. Hey, you cuffer, get inside. It's like no one seems to remember, but then she's not important in the whole galactic thing. But she's a war criminal. She's a genocidal maniac. The only reason why she left Death Watch is because Maul came in and started kicking the shit out of him. That's the only reason why she was. If she wasn't a racist, she probably would have stuck behind and went, "Yeah, all right, fair enough. but we love Bo. We love Bo. I like Bo. But
Well, what about Ray Sloan though?
she was in Squadrons as well, and I popped.
She was. You're
when
right.
I saw her in Squadrons, because like Brian was saying, back in 2015, September 2015, when they released Aftermath, that was I was one book away from finishing the entire published expanded universe. I never got around to reading Crucible. I bought it, never got around to it. And Aftermath came out, we all jumped on the Canon, and Ray Sloan was like the one to watch. And we were waiting for live action footage of her, and we never got it. And then we did get some in Squadrons, and I hold that dear, because she was when you read through those, if you take yourself back to 2015, she was the one that you think, okay, this is probably someone that we're going to have to watch. She's coming through the ranks here. She's competent, and never saw her again outside of a couple of books and maybe some comics. But I loved seeing her in Squadrons. I do want to see more of Ray Sloan. But if you ask me who's cooler, it's an unfair question.
Yeah.
Mithra or Naruto's going to win that one. Purely on the back of, with the blue skin, the red eyes. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But yeah, he's going to win it. But that's purely because he's just got 30 years more of history than what she has. But as long as they give us more content for her, that could change. Who knows?
Yeah, we haven't got a lot more on Ray Sloan, but you're absolutely right. And I don't know, I still to this day don't know how you say his actual Chiss name. You've spelled it out for me so many times, and I've never been able to wrap my hillbilly brain around being able to say the Mithrana Rudu. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. Mithrana.
I don't want to be disrespectful to the blue guy, but he is awesome. That's who I'm voting for. So, guys, head to our social media, vote on it. You can vote multiple times if you want for whoever you want to win. And next week we will talk about what you guys have voted as the cooler of the two villains. So let's get into some mailbag questions. How do you guys get a question on the show? You email it to us at starwarscanonpodcast@gmail.com. We'll go through and pick out a couple each week. And this week we've got 4, and I think we've got 4 pretty good questions this week. One of them I'm going to depend heavily on Jay, because like he said earlier, he's read all the EU stuff. And this is something that we're going to end up talking about here for the last question. So let's get into it. Question number 1 this week comes from Taylor Macron. And Taylor writes in and says, "Hey there, Brian and crew. I listened to your show on Spotify a couple of weeks ago and enjoyed it. Your passion for Star Wars really shines, and I enjoyed your podcast. I have not begun reading the new timeline books, only the EU novels. There's so much to read now. My question is, where should I start? Could you give some recommendations to a first-time reader? I'm glad I found your show. Keep doing what you're doing." Thanks for the question, Taylor. I am going to just preach the same thing you're going to hear from basically anybody who's read Canon. Start with Lost Stars. I think it's a great place to start for somebody who's getting into Canon for the first time, just because of the way it weaves itself through the entire original trilogy and then kind of expands on it a little bit and goes beyond it all the way up to like the Battle of Jakku. So I think that'd be a really great place to start. And I'm also going to go as far as to say the Aftermath trilogy. I think that's a really good place to start as well, simply because, it's post Return of the Jedi. You get a really good, I'll say it this way. Aftermath was meant to be kind of a reintroduction when it first came out into the Star Wars universe at the end of Return of the Jedi. This is, we hit the ground running with where the galaxy is after the destruction of the Death Star. That whole trilogy takes place over a year. I think that's a really good place to start too. Jay, I know you're not really big into some of the Canon novels, but what are some that maybe you would suggest to a first-time reader?
First-time reader, straight into Aftermath. I wouldn't do Lost Stars first.
Okay.
Purely on the grounds of, because as you said, it goes up to Jakku, but the Aftermath trilogy is what sets up Jakku. And I think because Lost Stars, I think it's not a controversial take. It's easy. Everyone loves Lost Stars. So, I think if you jumped in on the strongest book, everything else isn't going to match to it. I would start with Aftermath 1, 2, and 3. Once you then see how the whole Jakku saga escalates and the surrender of the Empire, the official surrender of the Empire, if you wanted to carry on moving forward towards the sequel trilogy, you can do with Bloodlines and what have you. But then once you've done all of that, I would seriously recommend sitting down to Lost Stars, because not only is it, I think, and I'm not the only one, it's the best canon novel that they've ever published, but it's out of all the Star Wars books that I've read, and as I said, I've read a fair amount over my years, it's my second favorite, and that encapsulates everything that I've read from the expanded universe. It's an incredible book, as you said, weaves its way straight through the original trilogy. But I think if you start from there, you're treading ground you already know, and there's nothing wrong with that because it gets you into familiar territory. But I think starting with Aftermath first and getting that trilogy out the way, you then, when you're reading Lost Stars, you can weave through the original movies, and then you can weave through the Jakku saga, which you just touched on. And that's the way I would do it. 1, 2, and 3, Aftermath, then Lost Stars.
I think that's a great suggestion, actually. Now that you say that, that makes way more sense than what I said. But I'm glad that it's the same 4 books, though, because I'm glad we agree on that. But yeah, I agree with you. Read Aftermath first, and then Lost Stars. Like you said, it weaves all the way through all of it. Usef, what's a book recommendation that you would throw out a first time canon reader?
I would ask you actually to do something that was a little bit, radical. And I loved Lords of the Sith. So, Lords of the Sith was a book that was about Anakin or Darth Vader, depending on how you want to look at him. But it was Vader. And he was trying to acknowledge himself being a member of the Sith with Palpatine overshadowing his acknowledgement. It was really intense. So basically, it was Darth Vader being himself and trying to be like, oh, wait, somebody's actually challenging my views. This is a very, very, very good book. Lords of the Sith is interesting. If you want to get the initial vibe of a Sith Lord, read that. Trust me.
Lords of the Sith did do a really good job of nailing the relationship between Vader and
It was
Palpatine.
very basic. It was very easy. And actually, that's a very important point. It was very easy.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, we talked 3 specific books here. 3 books that have been mentioned. Usef, you said Master and Apprentice. Brian and I both said Lost Stars. And I said up to Bloodlines. So it's worth mentioning to Taylor that the same author wrote those 3 books. Claudia. Yes. So Claudia Gray, I think she's done maybe 1 or 2 from the High Republic. I struggled to get into those. I got a handful of those novels, and I'm struggling with them. But if you start with the Claudia Gray book, you really can't go far wrong. She nails it. She knows it. She gets it. She knows the feeling of it. Jumps off the screen, jumps off the screen onto the page and into your brain. She's brilliant at it. I gotta give the girl credit for it.
Bloodline, I loved Bloodline also. That's a great political thriller.
It's very political, yes. It's all about Leia trying to accept who she is, and in the synopsis of it, the galaxy finds out just who she is. So it tries to explain how, when you see her in the sequel trilogy, why she's the rebel general again. Why is she not changed from Princess Rebel General? Why is she still in that role? That's pretty much why the book has come out. It's basically to say, yeah, this is why.
Yeah. Well, see, and Claudia Gray also wrote the Princess of Alderaan. There was a Leia novel where she was 16 years old.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yes.
That one was great too. I mean, that book had the final line of that book. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. The final line of that book was a gut punch. It was an absolute gut punch.
I remember talking to you about it when we were reading it. Literally 2 different continents. Oh, what page you on? Oh, man, page. Yeah, okay. Get a page. Go to the 3 pages next, right? Half page down with paragraph 3, third line. Call me back when you're ready. Oh, all right then.
Yeah.
George, you read that? What's going on? Yeah, I remember that.
It was so good. That was such a good book. It wasn't a Del Rey novel. It was a young adult novel that she wrote. And I loved that book. Claudia Gray gets Princess Leia. So if you're getting into canon for the first time, Leia is not a bad character to kind of brush up on getting into it, because she ends up being so pivotal as the timeline goes on further. So Claudia Gray, Timothy Zahn has always been the king of writing Star Wars books, in my opinion. Claudia Gray is the queen. If you're going to go there, I absolutely adore her. So I hope that answers your question. And end up letting us know where you ended up starting and what you're thinking of it so far. That'd be great. So thanks for the question, Taylor. Do appreciate it. Question number 2 this week comes from Peter Myers. And Peter writes in and says, hello there. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the changes Disney made to the Kyber crystals between Legends content and now. May the Force be with you. Thanks for the question, Peter. And yeah, if in case you guys have been living under a rock or something, Disney has indeed kind of changed the way Kyber crystals work in the new canon. Originally in the EU, weren't they just crystals, Jay? Weren't they just like
yeah?
Because I remember they used them to infuse the power of the Force into like shadow troopers and stuff in Jedi Outcast.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so basically, you go to a cave. You get your lightsaber crystal. Some Jedi would just collect them, right? And they'd be in the lightsaber workshop. If your skills were like very combat orientated, Jedi Guardian, you get a blue crystal. The same. It almost became, if you were a consular, they'd give you a green one. A sentinel, they'd give you a yellow one. So it was almost like, the way I saw them was like military cap badges. When someone from the military's got a certain badge on top of their beret, what platoon, what outfit, what regiment they're with. It's sort of like that. But then on the flip side, for some bizarre reason, there was no red crystals in the entire galaxy. So all lightsabers with a red blade had a synthetic crystal. Now, I thought that was a bit bizarre. Why does it have to be synthetic? Surely you've got crystals in the galaxy that are red. So that bit was a bit like, for me. I kind of like both elements, that there's colored crystals where you'd go in and you'd have a whole batch of crystals, and you'd pick which one you felt represented you or your strengths. And then I do like the whole bleeding of the crystal.
Yeah,
I like that. So I like both. If I have to pin myself on one or the other, I'm going to have to go canon, purely on the grounds that having no red crystals in the galaxy, I just thought it was a bit bizarre why they would put that. Oh, synthetic crystals. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, a synthetic crystal. So I'm going to go for canon on that.
I like what they've done with the Kyber crystals, because like I was saying, in like Jedi Outcast, which is one of my favorite video games of all time, they used the Kyber crystals as basically Force crystals. They were like the essence of the Force. You could pick them up and it would like boost your Force powers or whatever. You could infuse them with the Force. They weren't necessarily the crystals that powered Jedi lightsabers. They were the focusing crystal. It was the crystal they used to focus it. All lightsabers still had that power cell, like a giant AA battery inside of them that powered them. And now we've got the crystals actually being the power source for a lightsaber, which I like a lot more. I like that. I think that's awesome. And one of the other things they've added to it is that now Jedi kind of have a relationship with their crystal in a way. There's a bond there. We've seen instances in High Republic where, in High Republic, there's an instance where there's a Jedi she has 2 purple lightsabers, and one of them got taken by somebody else in the book, and she was able to find that person by sensing that crystal through the Force and being able to track them down that way.
That's cool. I like that.
I thought that was great. And to me, it seems more organic to do it the way they do now. I like the idea of the bleeding of the crystal. I like that a lot. That, a Sith lightsaber is not created, it's taken, basically. I really, really like that whole concept, and how you bleed your anger into it. And in a way, it's still kind of a bonding to the crystal that you're taking, because you're pouring so much of yourself into it. I really thought that was really fun. I thought that was really cool. And like I said, it feels more organic. We finally got to see it for the first time in live action in The Acolyte. I know a lot of people had an issue with that for some reason. I thought it was really cool seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I understand people getting mad. Well, why didn't Anakin's lightsaber change? Well, he's not making physical contact with his crystal, and so I like what they've done with it. I think it makes a lot more sense. Like you said, Jay, there's no synthetic crystals in the galaxy. There's no red lightsaber crystals in the EU. It just would make more sense that this is where they come from instead of just like growing a crystal in a lab somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. It seems impersonal, which I guess kind of lends itself to being, a dark side user or whatever. But this way, I think it like I said, it seems way more natural and way more organic. I think the canon version of it makes way more sense. And a lot of people crap on the idea that Disney did something with these kyber crystals, and not only the bleeding of it though, but the purifying is a really cool concept too, like what Ahsoka did. How she got her white lightsabers. I thought that was a really cool, how she poured basically all of her goodness into it and just purified this crystal, which also would bond you to the crystals. You know what I mean? And so
She reset that thing, didn't she?
yeah, I loved it. That was a great
got
moment.
a biro and she pressed a little button inside to reset it.
Love it. I absolutely love it. So I hope that answers your question, Peter. Thanks for sending it in, man. I do appreciate it. Let's get on to question number 3. And question number 3 this week comes from Joshua Stewart. And Joshua writes it and says, "Greetings from Canada. I am a long time listener of your show, but this is the first time I've ever written in. Today is my birthday, and I was hoping to get a question on your show. Thanks for sending in the question. And thanks for the kind words. And yes, happy birthday." Joshua goes on to write, "I am curious. Do you think George Lucas would have still sold Lucasfilm if he hadn't reacted to the prequels the way we did at the time? I think about it quite a bit and would like to see what you think. I love your show. I'm sorry. I love how your show has evolved over the years and hope to see you continue making content for many years to come. Take care, my friends." It's a great question. I like to think that, I'm not entirely sure he would have. I know he had a plan for, later on with the grandkids and with everything like that, and wanting to tell that story, and everything. So, Jay, I don't know. Do you think he would have ended up making these films or not?
Yeah, if the prequels were received critically well at the time, because commercially they were, people went to buy it and see it, but if they were critically received well, I bet your ass this franchise would never have been sold. It would have been banging out films, TV shows. Because if you remember, there was a TV show that they were filming similar to a similar technique to The Volume, except it was the camera that was doing it. We saw footage of it on YouTube, but it was costly, so they just said, nah, not to bother. And definitely George would have been making these movies and these shows. He never would have sold it. I think really so ultimately the fans have got themselves to blame on that by kicking off.
Yeah, I really don't know how it would have went. By the way, I think we lost Usef. I don't know if he had a bad connection or what, but maybe he'll pop back up here in a minute. I don't know how that would have gone. George Lucas talks a lot about, he had wanted to do those films at some point. But after the reception of those prequels, I'm not sure he would have done that. In interviews recently, after selling to Disney, he's made comments, about why would I do more movies if everybody just got, pissed off every time I made something new, and so
Yep.
I get where he was coming from with a lot of it and everything. And so I don't know how it would have gone down. It's a really good question. It's fun to think about. It really is. And, we can sit here and talk about what ifs all day long, but I'm not entirely sure. It's hard to say what he would have ended up doing, and think of how much different they would have, how much more different they would have been if they had gone that route instead. So it's a good question, Joshua. I'm not entirely sure. I like to think that he would have still ended up making his 7, 8, and 9. I hope that answers your question, Joshua. Like I said, it's kind of up in the air. So let us know what you guys think. Do you think George Lucas would have still sold to Disney and done, rode off into the sunset with $4.3 billion if, maybe everybody had been a little nicer to him about the prequels and whatnot, So let us know below. Sound off. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are. And the final question this week comes from Christina Harper. And Christina writes in and says, "Hi, Brian. My name is Christina. Since we're getting another season of Ahsoka, I was wondering if you could explain this idea I'm hearing about of Abeloth. I see people getting excited for the idea of this person showing up in canon, but I know next to nothing of them. I'd like to have an understanding just in case that is what's going to happen in season 2. You have a great show, and may the force be with you. Thanks for the kind words, Christina. And this is why I'm happy that Richard, this isn't the only reason I'm happy Richard J is on.
Well, this is
It's
the
one of the
reason I'm
main
happy.
reasons.
It's the reason.
It's one of the main reasons I'm happy that
The
Richard
reason
J is
I'm
on
happy
this.
Richard J is here.
Okay. All right. So, Abeloth, she starts her life out as a servant to the Ones. So she's mortal, right? Just like you, me, everyone else. She's a servant. She spends her time looking after the father, the son, and the daughter. The father and her fall in love. So then she sort of becomes the stepmother. But she's mortal. She doesn't have the powers or the wisdom, the knowledge, or that these celestial beings have. And she does the forbidden thing. She drinks. She drinks from a fountain of knowledge, and she bathes in like a well of power. Or it could be the other way around. Either way, she does what she shouldn't be doing. She drinks from this fountain, and it gives her these celestial powers, but it corrupts her in the process. Now, when we watched the Ahsoka finale way back when Balin is standing on those statues and he looks off into the distance, you see the gold flashing. Now, for me, instantly, I thought of Abeloth, and that's because she is described in the old expanded universe as having like hair of shimmering gold. Now, there's not a lot of images you can really find because the story of Abeloth had just got started. It semi got wrapped. They brought it in. She was imprisoned. The father, after learning what she had done, had imprisoned her in the maw, the center of the galaxy, and literally had black holes surrounding her to stop her from getting it out. Eventually she gets out and she just devours people. Life psychosis just gets in your mind. And she was set up to be the next major threat, so much so that in the old expanded universe, Luke had to go and find Sith, an ally with these Sith, not join the Sith, but just ally with them, to try and beat Abeloth. And you'd kill her, and she'd just evaporate in one place and just appear in another part of the galaxy. It got to a point where Luke had to step into what's now known as the World Between Worlds. He steps in there and he beats her in the World Between Worlds. He comes out and he says, I didn't even beat her. I think she's just had enough for now. And then we never got to really finish that story arc off. So she was finished for a bit. She is the ultimate, maniacal, demonic demigod.
Mm-hmm.
Literally all I can think of. She wanted the power, and it's not even because she was getting older. She was getting weak. She was dying of old age, and her adopted children are immortal. They still look like they're in their 20s. Her husband, who doesn't look a day over, like, I don't know, 60, 70. I mean, you be the judge. He looks pretty old in Clone Wars, but that's just the animation and the beard. But, he doesn't age. They don't age. They're gods. They just stay as they are. And she sits there and she just broods on the fact that the minute she dies, she's going to be forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not going to remember this, me in thousands of years' time. Doesn't matter how much you love me, you're not going to remember me in 1,000 years' time. And she does what she shouldn't do, and it corrupted her, and she became an absolute maniacal tyrant, an absolute beast. So a lot of people, myself included, have seen a couple of edits. In fact, I was watching one earlier on YouTube, Shin Hati as Abeloth, because the sort of look the Shin Hati's got, it's kind of like the look of Abeloth in some of the illustrations in the old expanded universe, except there's a huge toothy smile. Literally, it's just one big ear-to-ear toothy grin. But I'd love it if they brought Abeloth in. I absolutely love it. We can leave the galaxy for now into this next galaxy, and just experiment and play with the demigod. And then when they come back, then we can crack on with the rest of the story.
Isn't she, we have the Mortis gods, the father and the daughter and the son. Isn't she like the mother of that? Or
Well, that's what I was saying. She's the stepmother, because she starts off as the servant to the ones, right? That's the Mortis gods, the ones. And she falls in love with the father, and they marry, and she becomes the stepmother. But obviously she doesn't inherit any of those abilities. She's still mortal. She ages, and she's going to die eventually. And it corrupts us. Well, it twists her psyche, seeing that or her adopted family, in a sense, is moving on without her, and she's just withering into dust. And then that's when she touches the font of knowledge or power, drinks from it, and just becomes some warped, corrupted demigod. And that's when the father then imprisons her by just putting her in the center of the galaxy and slapping a lot of black holes around her.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I really do. I've seen, I kind of want to get your opinion on this. I've seen the name before, and I've heard some people kind of talk about the character a little bit and kind of what Abeloth is. But I've seen the idea get thrown around that this would be a really good way for Natalie Portman to make her return to Star Wars, and she play Abeloth in some weird kind of illusion kind of thing, since you've got Anakin's Force Ghost now on Peridia also, and so with the whole mother and the father and the whole thing with the Clone Wars, and everything like that, and how the father wanted Anakin to replace him and like all this weird stuff. Do you think it would make sense for Natalie Portman to play an Abeloth?
Well, if you go back to the episode in the Clone Wars on Mortis, you do see the father project himself as Shmi to test Anakin. So it's not outside the realms of possibility, but it wouldn't, for me personally, it wouldn't be, let's cast Natalie Portman to do a whole series run. It would be, no, I cast somebody else as Abeloth, and if on the off chance Anakin steps up to have a word, then you could just flash images and bring Natalie back in and say, right, we'll do a conversation and we'll flash back and forth. Just like in the World Between Worlds, where Anakin was, after he kicked Ahsoka out of the vision and she was back on that sort of platform. You remember when he walked through the smoke and he flickered Vader?
Loved it.
Something like that. That's gonna be, just having Natalie Portman, with her hands on her neck going, Anakin, I love you. But
you're breaking my heart.
Yeah, but the thing is, the way I thought was strange about that, so I don't even know if it'd even work, because remember when Anakin was talking to little Ahsoka in the visions, and it's almost like he'd forgotten he was Darth Vader, because she was saying, "Oh yeah, but you're more than that." I said, "Yeah, but look at you, like look at what you turned out to be." Oh, is that what this is about? Oh, well, yeah. You're a giant saying, "A maniac." What do you mean? What it's about? Of course, that's what it's about. But for him, it's like doesn't have that sort of doesn't appear to me that he has that sort of concept anymore, because he's now a celestial. He's one with the Force. It's almost like Vader is not even a footnote in time as far as he's concerned. So I don't even know if that would still resonate with him, seeing Natalie Portman. I mean, pardon me. To be fair, let's just say that they did bring Natalie Portman back in, and Anakin's Force Ghost sort of didn't really take much of an interest. I probably would be a little bit like, oh, well, the love couldn't have been that strong then. So, you'd still need a little bit of like, Padme, I don't like sand. The Lego Star Wars.
Once you're an eternal being, and you see eternity, that little lifespan you had is nothing really when you think about it, So it's an interesting thought. I remember when that episode of Ahsoka aired, when you see that kind of gold glint off in the distance, I didn't know what he was looking at. I was thinking, maybe it's a portal to the, the Mortis realm, that we saw in Clone Wars or whatever. But then as soon as I got on Facebook and everybody was like, Abeloth, 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 I'm like, what the hell is Abeloth? Because I haven't read a whole lot of the EU stuff. I've read some of the bigger named books, but I haven't really dove into it and really gotten a lot of the stuff. So I don't know what Abeloth was. I had no idea. So that's why I'm glad you were here to be able to explain that, because it's a cool concept. It really is. And it's a really good way to be able to touch on the Mortis gods in live action. And I kind of can't wait to see how that goes now, if that's what they're going to end up doing. Whatever medium that ends up taking, since Ray Stevenson's gone and everything. I want to see that story play out now. I really, really do. So, all right. Well, that is your answer, Christina. That's Abeloth. I'm not like I said, there's probably a way like how big was she in EU? Really?
Well,
Like one book, or was it like?
Well, you've got to take into consideration, right? She came about because of the Clone Wars. So what was that? 2007,
2008, yeah,
2008. So it was
so that would have been.
And the buyout was 2012.
Yeah, so it would have been right before that.
It was a case of here she is, now she's gone.
Gotcha.
I think the books that they brought out was basically to sort of introduce her, and they kind of give her the sort of the get out, the sort of false death, so that's her sort of out to retain integrity as the character, while sort of setting up a new playing field, because now you got Luke and the Jedi Order allied with a Sith cult to take this girl down. So, what would that mean for the Order? Would they start? I can't imagine Luke trading knowledge with Sith and taking on board what they have to say. I can certainly see Luke sitting there making mental notes and recording it, but not to teach other Padawans, but just to make like, this is what they think. Make a note of that, put it somewhere in the old holocron somewhere, so we know. If something goes down, and we know that this is the root cause. But you had a whole new, you had Jedi and Sith working together, so that was a big moment. But it all ended straight away, and we'll never know how it'll finish off.
That does sound awesome, actually. What book was that in the EU? Do you remember the title? Do you remember what book that was?
I'd have to have a look at it. It's one of the, if you go to the look of the timeline, it's one of the last series runs, because they've got like big series runs. And I can't think of what it's called. Was it
Legacy of the Force? Because I think that was the last one, wasn't it?
It could be Legacy of the Force then.
Okay. I'll have to go back and look. I'm sure we can Google it and find out, because you kind of got me wanting to read it now. That actually sounds kind of badass, actually.
A lot of the books from 2001. I mean, the way I sort of break down the EU, you got your prequel movies, and then you got prequel movies. So you got like all the classic EU, which to me is the classic EU, because we grew up in it. We got old enough to really start ingesting these books. The
Thrawn,
EU,
Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, that was 1991. That was. So I mean, I was 6 when that came out. So by the time I got to an age to really start to appreciate those, they'd all been retconned by George, because he brought out the Phantom Menace, and everything that those books had set up about the Clone Wars, scrapped. Didn't make any sense anymore. The Jedi not having a temple with roaming the galaxy on a big dreadnought, scrapped. Didn't make any sense anymore. And then my favorite Star Wars novel, complete at all to date, was Tatooine Ghosts, and it was a book that was set not long after Return of the Jedi, and it's Leia learning to accept who she was, because in the original Throne trilogy she got kids, which is set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but the book that's published, that's set like literally immediately after Return of the Jedi. They fly in back to the rendezvous point. She's adamant, no kids, because I'm Vader's daughter. And then you got that book, 5 years later, she got kids, she got twins, with one on the way. So Tatooine Ghosts is the book that bridges in between, and so how she accepts who she is. And it was published in 2002. So it's just after Attack of the Clones. So, she's on the Lars homestead, and she finds Shmi Skywalker's sort of video diary. And she's looking through all these entries, and Shmi catalogs and makes all these diary entries for her son, who's now gone off to join the Jedis. And she's literally leaving him messages in the hopes that one day he does come back and she could present him with all of these memories that he'd never experienced because he was away training with the Jedi. So, Life Day. They film it and they just record Life Day in the journal and with Uncle Owen and Baru and Clegg Lars or Clegg Lars, stepfather Clegg Lars, and then they'd show it to Anakin. Then look, we thought of you while you were, you're still one of the family. We love you, all of that. And Leia's learning who Anakin was. All the money that he made off the winnings for the pod racer after they bought the engine, the rest of the money that was left over was divvied up to some slaves were freed off the back of it, the smaller kid slaves that weren't, I know it's awful to think about it, but weren't as financially viable, because you had to obviously invest in them to get them stronger, to be grown up, and feed them to be strong to do the work. So like some of the kid, his friends, he bought their contracts out, and they just got to live their lives happily. He was a hero to these people. The only ever human to win to pod race, win the Boot at Eve Classic, and she learns who Anakin was, and that was an amazing book. And then you had the Yuuzhan Vong War, which was just basically a way of saying, right, okay, the films are still coming out, and it's retconning everything we do, so we got to find a way around this, otherwise we got to stop writing books. So they said, I tell you what, we'll bring in a bunch of creatures that cannot stand technology, and they'll just decimate 2/3 of the galaxy, so all records of everything are lost. And then that way, then, if something comes out in the show, like the Mortis arc in Clone Wars, and I read that Mortis arc in the book before I saw the Clone Wars episode, and I was like, I gotta watch Clone Wars. This looks amazing. And so, they would say, let's just say, the Mortis arc comes out, all of a sudden Luke is just wandering around the galaxy, comes across a Jedi temple, goes in there, finds a data pad, plugs it in, boop, apparently, in 2000, we got apparently this happened in the Clone Wars, this happened. No record of it before, because obviously when these books were written, George hadn't done it. So here's the missing history. And that's what they did. They did it as a way to basically softly reset the galaxy by saying, smashing all the records and all the technology. And if something did sort of contradict itself, because something new in George's canon had come out, which contradicted something that had been previously published in the expanded universe, they could just say, the records were lost, or the records were incomplete. So that was their way of getting around it. And the final bit then came after that. It might be Legacy of the Force. I don't know. I'll have to check. That's when she comes in.
I'll be dang.
Really good. Really, really, really good. It's a shame that it never got finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like I said, I've touched on some of the novels. A lot of the stuff post Return of the Jedi, I didn't get into. I read the Thrawn trilogy, the Heir to the Empire trilogy. I read that, and I read Shadows of the Empire. That was my childhood, with Shadows of the Empire. I loved that novel, and then everything that came with it too, because there was a huge
the N64 game.
Yeah, it was the game. There was a comic run that kind of built onto the novels. There was a whole toy line. How often did a novel get a toy line?
with a flat top?
With the Gozer look. Yeah, he had that. I mean, it was really cool. And I mean, I love Shadows of the Empire. I thought that
you a god.
There is no Chewie, only Zool. But yeah, no, I absolutely loved that entire initiative, because they kind of did the Shadows of the Empire the same way they did High Republic, where they kind of just did this whole expanded thing over the comics and the book and the game and all the toys and everything. It was so cool. So I really, really enjoyed that. But
yeah,
I never really got into some of the older stuff, the I shouldn't say older, some of the later stuff, you know what I mean? Later in the timeline and everything. So maybe I need to go back and reread it. I bought Darth Plagueis because I'm going to read Darth Plagueis. That's one that everybody keeps telling me I need to read.
There was just the one book I was mentioning earlier, Tatooine Ghost. There's a bit in there which I really, really loved. And it, again, is based off of, because Attack of the Clones was the new movie out at the time. Mm-hmm. You know what, Anakin decimates an entire Tusken village?
Mm-hmm.
The surviving Tusken settlements believed that they had displeased the sun god, which is why they were aggressive and sacrificed people, which led to, remember in the original movie when the Tusken tries to grab Luke?
Yeah.
It's all Anakin's continuously knock-on effects throughout the game.
Oh,
So, you're seeing something which is like insignificant in the movie. It's just sort of world building, telling you sort of these Tuscans were there taking people to sacrifice them to the sun god, all off the back of what Anakin did 20 years prior.
that's wild. That's
So
absolutely wild.
it shows the reach, that how central this character was, in terms of galaxy wide, and because they did the same thing in Knights of the Old Republic 2. Darth Treya, she says something to you. You get this one part in the game. You bump into somebody and you have the opportunity to either apologize or threaten them. And either way you do it, you get scolded either way. If you apologize, then you give the guy some money. He walks off and he gets mugged. But if you threaten to kill the guy, he runs off terrified, trips over, falls and hurts himself. So it's all about whatever your actions are, positive or negative, will have consequences.
No matter what.
It's how far-reaching those consequences go. And that's one of that book, Tatooine Ghosts, is a must-read. Even though it's expanded universe, it's just a very focused layer book. It's essentially the bloodlines of
the
EU universe. Yeah,
I need to pick that one up because I hear you talk about that one a lot, and it's one that I think I'm gonna have to end up picking up. Have they done an essential? I don't know if they've done an essential Legends collection on it yet. Maybe not. They've been doing the bigger ones first.
I don't think it'll get one because it's just a one-off novel. These collections are usually big events.
Fair enough. Well, Christina, thank you for sending in the question. Hope you have a little bit of an idea who Abeloth is now. If and when we do get a season 2 of Ahsoka, I shouldn't say if because I think we are, but it's just a matter of when at this point and how they're going to go about it. You'll kind of have an idea of who Abeloth is. Do some reading on her. I think I'm going to because it sounds very interesting to me. It's something that, like I said, I know next to nothing about, but I'd like to know some more about it too. So I think that's going to do it for the show. I think we lost Usef a while ago. I'd still like to thank him for joining us tonight. I know it was late where he was at. Jay, I'd like to thank you because I know it's late where you're at as well. It's always a pleasure to have you on and talking some Star Wars with us. So guys, make sure to check out our social media, our Facebook and our YouTube, and our Twitter at SW Canon Podcast. We'll be posting the new episodes there. And you can find the villain bracket on all of our social media as well. Make sure to go vote on that as well. So if there's nothing else, Jay, let's sign off for the night, and we'll talk to you guys next week. May the Force be with you.
Always.
You've just been listening to the Star Wars Canon Podcast. You can catch new episodes of the podcast every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on whatever platform you're listening on right now. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons and give us a follow so you're notified whenever new content drops. If you'd like to get a mailbag question on the show, you can email us at starwarscanonpodcast@gmail.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and check out our website, www.starwarscanon.net. Those links can be found in the description of this episode. All opinions expressed on this show are those of the speaker and may not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of everyone else involved on the panel. This show is produced and edited by me, Brian Miller, with music composed by Brook Munro.